Namaste and welcome to Inspirations and Interviews with Ilona Selke. Today with my dear beloved guest, Amoraea, who is an author, creator of the Phoenix Code teachings, musician, and initiator. And I love that part about you. You're a very good ceremonial initiator. You create groups in which people are evoked to get in touch with their innermost being. I've experienced your work and you for 15 years. I've actually dedicated half a book to our encounters on the interdimensional realms, and it's called Yoga for the Soul, Dolphins, Love, and Destiny. So welcome. Thank you, Amoraea, for being here with me. You just visited Uluwatu Temple on Bali, and we're here with you. You're at a hotel, and I'm so grateful you're taking the time. And you've had a blissful day. I am here in North Bali at the Shambhala Retreat Center, and we're facing a little bit of what Bali brings sometimes is the internet issues. So hopefully bear with us. If there are some delays, they will go and feed out. We'll come back. So welcome, Amoraea. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's my deep pleasure to be with you here again and explore these vast realms of the soul and consciousness and higher states of awareness, and how to bring that more here into the physical dimension.
Yes. I love communing with you because, first of all, you and I have had hours and hours of interdimensional exploration together. And I have to admit, I've interviewed quite a lot of people, and very few people have access to the realms that we have shared together. Most people don't have the concepts to experience those things. So one of the things I discussed with a woman who's been around the block, who's seen a lot of healers, she said she hasn't seen too many people like this. And I explained to her that our concepts of how the cosmos is set up determines the lid of what we experience. And because of that, I don't want to be talking. I'd like to ask you how you would describe the cosmology that you live by. Soul, embodiment, creation, God, divinity embodied. Can you tell us your cosmology?
Yes. My sense is that we're like the human, nervous system is like an antenna, and for our consciousness to dial into the divine energies and the lattice work of creation starts to come through us the more that we create coherency and openness in how we dilate our soul open is to the extent of how much the creator or the universal source can move through us, can peer through its lens. And so contrary to the sense that we're just a drop in the ocean, and we were talking about this earlier, and that we just dissolve into the ocean, the cohering principle of actually creating a fulcrum of identity is what allows the alignment of God to peer through us, and that connection to the divine opens up through us as a vessel. And so we have a very deep purpose, like the fruition of God is to actually become a vehicle for its presence to peer back into itself as a lens and an engine to motivate the whole evolutionary mechanism that first generated in its origin.
So the picture that you were just drawing, of course, speaks from my heart, is the understanding that the divine, which is the source of all being, the ground of all being, creates itself into form, which then peers back into its origin, into its vastness, into its source. And that vehicle, that's what we call soul or individuated awareness, the lens you call it, the more it is aligned and coherent, the stronger the connection back to the origin is, yeah? The loop,
Yes.
the snake that bites its tail, right? That's oftentimes how creation is depicted.
Yes, exactly. And so the strength of our signal is what allows the feedback loop, or the echo that's permeated from that formless space into form, into the creation matrix. And so when we start to do our practices, and that's where we want to get practical with how do we open to that state so that God can use us as that engine and find itself at ever increasing
brilliance.
Presence.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, because velocity speaks to how light, when we start to move at speeds of even hyperdimensional, like consciousness is actually faster than light.
Right.
And so light as a principle kind of reminds us that the higher in consciousness we go, the apparent speed or ability for light to implode back into itself
Reaches infinity and becomes eternal.
Infinity.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
I think that increase of speed, the coherency allows for increased speed. And at that point, we touch the mouth of God, or the opening, that which some people call the dissolving into the great ocean. Now, you've been around the block in meditation, and we have experienced ever increasing levels of that dissolution into the one, right? So tell us a little bit about reaching into the connection between individuated God particle and the singularity, all simultaneous God essence that make connection, about that and ever increasing velocities.
Well, I feel like the power and the purpose, especially with what we've done before, for hours and hours we've logged in, and we've gotten refined at actually tracing that pathway. And the more that we do it, we create this overlapping of our own lenses. And that kind of also starts to create a feedback loop together that, yes, we can go there on our own, but there's something also about, God using the channel of two to create a
new singularity,
higher operating system in a sense. And
yes.
So what we do is we start to engage at a certain level, and then we move our locus of attention through each other into what would appear to be vaster and vaster states, but actually is also more laser-like in its progression of moving into even more intensified or rarefied spaces in which, consciousness gathers itself at like a bundle, and then it increases in its intensity, its brilliance, and then it's almost like another supernova flare starts to open up like a lotus, and then from there we move together. I mean, that's what you and I practice. We move together as that now combined light, and we, in a sense, we open up for the hand of God, or the consciousness of God, to then pull us to the next level together. And yeah, what I would say is, like, the bridge to God is always open on the side of God. It's just for us to open more towards it. And
right. Increasing our alignment so that we can touch in with the face of God, as we might poetically say it. The overlapping of the two into singularity increase the lens, and then that becomes a greater experience of wholeness or unity, like another level of, I want to call it enlightenment or engagement with the singularity of the one at a hyper state. It's almost like a never-ending engine. There is never a static end game of I am stably in oneness and boink, I'm gone, and there is it, and that's it, and that's it, which is implied in many people's concept of moksha or samadhi. It's like absence. Okay, so maybe we can talk about that. How is this, what you describe, different from what you've known other people to describe samadhi states?
That's a great question. I was feeling into it today, actually, as I was having a very deep meditation experience and witnessing how the more that I surrendered into that space, which is my original ground of being, the more this increase of connection to all that is just became more and more brilliant. And the thing that really makes it powerful is that the I that I am does not dissolve away. What happens is I surrender into it, and then it actually takes me to another level of its creation matrix. And then I cohere around that, and I actually have a vaster degree of presence, of connection to all that is, and my intensity is actually raised, and I feel like my actual nervous system or the structure of my inner being actually it's transformed. There's an actual change in my biostate too. Like my brain wave starts to go into higher and higher resonant features, and I feel like my endocrine system is starting to produce its next plume of chemicals or whatever, so that
Right.
my whole being can actually then move up in velocity to that next state. And so one of the features that happens is that my individuation becomes more and more potent instead of more and more diffuse.
Okay.
That's what I would say the difference with samadhi is. It kind of it flattens out into almost like it's, I kind of see it as the final trap of the ego that thinks that it's finally won the game.
Mm-hmm.
and blitzed into nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
when nothingness is not the end.
Right.
The end state is actually to continue to become the spark at the very iris of God. Like there's the pinpoint of your own identity that just blazes more. So,
And it's like when we say the own, it's like God's identity, individuated, looking back at itself, opening to greater levels of realization of itself, but through this formed vehicle that at once is biological, but at another level is a conscious entity that has evolved
yes.
through eternity, through the manifest eternity, into this capacity state. And that would explain the difference in capacitance within our own life from day to day, but also from soul expression to soul expression on this planet, where we are all created of the one fabric, but yet it's clear to see different beings at different levels of evolution. Can you address the different stages of soul maturation, awareness levels, or expressions of capacity, how that's possible, and how is evolution and soul evolution a reality? Or is it we come and go? Some people in interviews have said it's just like the entirety just drops down into other possibilities, and all these different possibilities emerge to reassemble themselves into the one all matrix, to come back as independent versions of the matrix, not having a coherent evolutionary pathway.
Yeah, so my understanding of soul awareness is, there's obviously dedication is involved. And so our primary choices determine how much we put emphasis on evolving the soul. And so, hey, we all want soul evolution, right? Okay, anyone that starts the spiritual path is going to start to feel like, yes, I want to grow. I want to grow. Now, when the growth of the soul becomes more important than the ego's need to feel loved, the ego's need to validate itself or to follow its desires because it's wanting to explore itself, something else takes over. And I think that's where the handshake of of God, or we could just say the handshake of our soul, who we are at a pinnacle level. So the eternal nature of our soul starts to peer down and through us the more and more that we say, I dedicate to this process. I don't know the end state, but actually the more and more that we meditate, we get glimpses of the end state, and then that pulls us forward towards it, because we have now this point of contact that then, if we looked at it in time, space, we'd almost say it's the future of who we are becoming that's pulling us. But in reality, it's the eternal part of us that's beyond the lip of time that really starts to become an attractor field. And so that Genesis energy starts to spin our focus, and it spins our consciousness more and more towards it. And so the things that used to distract us fall away. That doesn't mean that they don't happen anymore. It's that we keep going back to, wait, this is what's really important.
And we know the sukkar. We have tasted it, and to compare anything to it, I mean, we might forget, but we do usually remember that sukkar of bliss and illumination supersedes all and everything else. And that usually does pull through eventually and becomes more and more a permanent state as we grow, as we're capable of holding that frequency of opening to the divine.
Right.
So then the way you're describing it, and of course it harmonizes with me so perfectly, so that's why I love our conversation and I love hearing it from the outside, is the concept of soul. I mean, you've described before the human state that aligns itself into coherency, actually accelerates the frequency bandwidth, and you said even speeds up, and in studies with advanced meditating monks, they found they go into gamma brainwave frequencies, whereas I think samadhi goes into the lowest brainwave frequencies. And both are needed. We need to drop into relaxation to rise, but then we burst through, especially if we activate both brain halves and go in a center channel up to something that goes into hyperdimensional space. But at that hyperdimensional space, now we are going to activate a drop of isness that is the lens of the all individuated, right? So this lens, let's talk about it again. Does it evolve over time? Does it reincarnate? Does it have a history? And then, of course, maybe parallel dimensions and or time backward and forward. Maybe you can address that as well. Does it have a focal point?
Because I do believe in the nature of the soul, I do believe in evolution as a very real mechanism. Now, how we describe it in relation to time and space, I think that it's hard to talk about. It kind of breaks down in some of the concepts. But I do believe that the soul, as it takes that momentum to start to organize around its central channel, in a sense, it does start to, I think what it really has to happen is when we gather what the soul is for, when we gather the purpose of, like we've talked about, the engine of God becoming more and more aware of itself through us, that evolutionary mechanism is what starts to create more I don't know. I'd like to actually hear what you think about it.
But just finish your sentence and then I'll
So the my sense is that the energy of the soul has a formation to it. So it's gathering information, it's gathering learning, teachings from different incarnations, and those are helping to formulate kind of the alphabet of the soul. Like, we need to learn in this way. We need to understand the idea of pleasure and pain principle. We need to understand, virtues of humility, but we also need to understand the stabilizing of what it means to be in form, and so I think there's so many aspects that we need to learn, that's why we're offered multiple incarnations to bring the fruition of what the soul is here to experience in the realms of dimensional incarnation.
Yeah, yeah. And the way I see it with different people when I go into different assembly points at different levels, and I meet beings at their different chakric levels, but then beyond the crown chakra, in additionally increasing levels of refinement, beyond. I mean, the matrix of maturity or coherency, I love that word, creates a configuration, a matrix of a lens, a purity, a crystalline structure, but not a crystalline. I mean, it's like a blip of consciousness that is a lens, but that gets stronger, has more oomph, and bends time space in a much faster way. So larger matrices of soul awareness spin greater gravitational fields than beginning ones. That's why when we're in the presence of more enlightened beings, we also start igniting around them in that level within ourselves, whether or not we have reached that. But when they're gone, we need to stabilize that. Right. So yeah, but what I see is the ability to touch into eternity increases with the purity. But like you said, collecting maturity at all levels, not just at the most peak capacity that we can achieve, but the peak capacity of compassion, the peak capacity of different virtues, such as purity, reflecting truth, transparency, of forgiveness, of living as the pure expression of selflessness in a way, even though there is still the vehicle of consciousness. Right. And being for the benefit, being a benefactor to life, becoming one with the life that we touch, becoming one with the time space that we touch at larger capacities until we've merged with eternity, does have an imprint in the manifest worlds, as in my experience, as a coalescing dewdrop of consciousness, which I would call soul. And that is apparently what pain and pleasure as a principle of teaching it refines. The pain and the suffering we go into tells us, look, something is out of alignment. It's usually when our energy level is descending and contracting. And the pleasure principle, there are of course two kinds, and we have to learn to distinguish between gluttony, which makes us feel like, oh, yummy, like a big piece of chocolate or cake, and the feeling of ignition, where the Amrita, like you said, that when you raise your consciousness, the neurotransmitters in the brain start exuding that which the ancients used to call the Amrita, the dewdrop of God within our nervous system. It's a different type of pleasure that comes from ascending. So pain and pleasure are the feedback system of the universe, set up to teach, to move in one direction towards the center of creation, which is why I believe the pain-pleasure principle is not just a survival mechanism, as some people would say. It's like, oh, here's danger, there's, a big wolf might try to eat me, and fear and run away, but it's like guiding us towards the source of God light, and guiding us towards a greater assembly, like you call it, of soul intensity, of presence, of reaching into the very core of God in all things, in all being, as an eternity of all essence.
Yes, and I'd like to explore with you when you talk about touching into the nature of all beingness. That I wonder what's your idea around bodhisattva and around, you know, like the Buddhists and the Tibetans, they talk about, you know, that we are also part of a collective energy, and enlightenment comes when all of us increase into that state of enlightenment together. And so what is the nature of that? Is that real, or do we just, you know, we're here for our own enlightenment and evolution and everything else is kind of an illusion? Or what do you think about that?
Okay, let's take turns, and then I'd love to hear how you verbalize it. Thank you. I love that question. You know, in the depth of my heart, I am very still aligned with my past lives in Tibetan Buddhism, and I have past life dreams of that. However, there is a part of me, as much as I at once feel like, yes, we live for the illumination of all that is. Once you've figured things out, you start teaching. It is inherent in life. So the universe wants to re-inform itself from the inside out. And when you've reached to just a bit more light, you immediately want to go out and share it. So I think this desire to illuminate all parts, all particles of creation is inherent in the structure of life.
Yes.
This giving up, the Bodhisattva vow is the vow that says, I will give up my own personal enlightenment until all parts of creation are enlightened. And I reached a point in my life where I realized at a deep level there was an illusionary understanding about it. And it may be that it's when I hear that sentence from an egoic state, such as myself, will give up my enlightenment until all other parts are enlightened, is an impossibility, obviously, because creation seems to create itself over and over again. It reaches the finality of coming into singularity. Just even the black hole, right? The Milky Way has at its center the black hole, and it drives all the light into the center. But now scientists have found out that it expulses plasmic, invisible, almost energetics into the hypersphere that then coalesces through the gravitational field back at the outer fringes and will become eventually planets, solar systems, suns. First of all, suns and magma, and then eventually planets will develop into molecules and atoms and molecules, and will reassemble itself into cellular life, and then moving things that then develop eyes and breathe and food and then become conscious itself, you know? So at the moment of reassembling itself at the center, just even on a small microcosmic galactic level,
Yeah.
it spits itself back out to rediscover itself. You know, it's like, okay, so if I'm coming to the center moment, at the same time something new is born that's totally unconscious. Obviously, I can't wait with enlightenment till that has reached my moment of now. But the moment of my illumination is at once the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega, and somehow the entire dedication of love into the one is all that I can utter. It's like I offer myself into service, into surrender. And that's, I think, what the Bodhisattva vow is. It's I offer my entire beingness to the benefit of all.
Beautifully put. Beautiful. Yeah.
How about you? Tell me your version.
You know, what you share also is the reminder that Genesis is an ongoing event. It's not something that happens in the beginning with the Big Bang at the onset of time or something. Genesis is a continual toroidal flowering. And you kind of described that shape too, even with the spiral arms of the galaxy is part of the toroidal fields. And so, yeah, I also feel that the idea of compassion and wisdom that marries us to the whole of creation is, I think that's what the Tibetans, at the heart of what they were sharing about was, as you said, it relinquishes all the aspects of the ego to touch the moment where the unitive nature of being realizes itself through you. And in the realization of it through you, you are at one with all beings. And so you are part of the matrix that revealed itself as suffering, revealed itself as enlightenment, revealed itself as love, revealed itself as the inhibition of love, you know, and everything of the human game and the human drama all reveals itself as the kind of the grand perfection of how incarnation flowers into existence, and the many petals of the many qualities that can be experienced all are seen to be necessary for the gathering up of consciousness to come back into itself. And so in that way, I also feel like the bodhisattva denies nothing, right? It denies nothing, and so it has no resistance to anything. And so without resistance, to bring it back to physics, you become a superconductive. You as a human, you have zero resistance to the program of life. And life is full of all kinds of things, all the way down to the root chakra and the survival mechanism of it. And so the program of life, with its increasing levels of rarity of consciousness that, you know, we can see in the map of the chakras, reveals its perfection. And when we talk about Kundalini, it's a very non-linear experience to awaken to that cosmic current. It doesn't just like start at the base and then move itself up. It's you know, anyone who's had a Kundalini experience will see that it has its own intelligence too. And so that, I think enlightenment also starts to look at the beginning and the middle levels. It can look like a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and that's why there's many different paths that map out to progression. But I think a lot of paths kind of end at a certain place, and they don't, you know, that's where all of the religions at their primary core, even though most of those things are mystical and they're hidden in the esoteric scripts, but they probably all describe something very similar. And if not, it's because they can't describe it anymore at that point.
Right, and inherent in the belief system of the religion, it has a particular shape and a lid and a bottom and a belief. But in general, religion focuses primarily on instructing the human with ethics and ethical behavior.
Very true.
And I believe especially the monotheistic religions were and came about at a level of human evolution in our time period anyways, in the last 10,000 years. Less than that in our time reckoning, we've had monotheistic religions to teach about ethics and to behave kindly, cooperatively, not to be animalistic, really. It's trying to curb the primal drives of me first and my survival first, and make us a more cooperative group mind that honors the others, takes care of other people's needs, even though they may interfere with our own personal needs. And as such, I do believe that you know, I have my own little theory about the all-seeing eye. The all-seeing eye is something that we have taught humanity, or religions have taught humanity, to develop that sense of being seen for every single action by a force that supersedes consciousness or human consciousness, and yet makes us accountable to that one that watches us. The danger I do see now with AI being the all-seeing eye is that it's a mechanical version of that ethical accountability, surveilling every action. And of course, you know, in Singapore, when I saw all the metal bars on the doors, I said, have they had a lot of crime here? And they said, oh, no crime whatsoever. And I said, well, what were those bars about? They look like they've been here a long time on all the windows. Oh yeah, that wasn't a long time ago, but now we have surveillance cameras and nobody does anything bad anymore. Yes, that's another all-seeing eye, but it is what we used to teach the masses is the concept of there is an all-seeing eye, and there is an all-seeing consciousness, or something that watches us, and actually more effectively than AI could ever be, it feeds back the appropriate balance act, the reward or punishment.